Welcome back to Old Coin Value. This Roosevelt dime looks like ordinary pocket change, but one tiny detail hidden on it has triggered collector sales worth over six figures, and most people spend it without ever noticing. First coin. The 1979 D Roosevelt dime looked ordinary the moment it left the Denver Mint, slipping into circulation beside thousands of identical coins that most Americans barely noticed. Yet decades later, collectors began paying far closer attention to certain examples from that year, because hidden among the massive production run were pieces with strange characteristics, unusual strike qualities, and subtle minting irregularities that transformed a simple 10-cent coin into something people searched rolls, dresser drawers, and old bank envelopes to find. The coin itself carries the familiar portrait of President Franklin Delano Roosevelt on the obverse, his profile framed by the word liberty and the national motto "In God We Trust," while the reverse displays the torch, olive branch, and oak branch design that had become symbolic of resilience and national unity. But what gives the 1979 D such fascination is not only its historical connection to late 1970s America, a time of inflation, uncertainty, and economic transition. It is the growing realization that even modern-looking coins can hide details that dramatically separate one dime from another. Under certain lighting, some examples reveal unusually sharp strikes, mirror-like surfaces, or subtle doubling in the lettering that immediately catches a trained eye, and those tiny distinctions can mean the difference between pocket change and a coin that suddenly enters serious collector conversations. As the years passed, collectors noticed that Denver Mint dimes from 1979 sometimes displayed inconsistent production quality, creating opportunities for unusual varieties to emerge from an otherwise common issue. Some pieces show faint but visible doubling around the date or lettering, while others feature off-center strikes, clipped planchets, or oddly formed rims that suggest the coin never completed the minting process normally. Because the Roosevelt dime series often receives less public attention than silver dollars or wheat pennies, remarkable examples can remain hidden for decades before someone finally notices what they have. That possibility fuels the excitement surrounding this coin, especially when old collections are inherited from relatives who casually stored rolls of change in coffee cans or forgotten drawers. A collector examining a seemingly average 1979 D might suddenly discover a sharply struck specimen with exceptional luster and nearly flawless surfaces, and in the unpredictable world of numismatics, that moment can feel like uncovering a secret history concealed in plain sight. Stories circulate through coin shows and auctions about collectors who purchased inexpensive rolls only to uncover coins later valued in the thousands, turning an overlooked dime into the equivalent of a sudden financial surprise that could rival a car payment, emergency fund, or even part of a home down payment. The physical appearance of the 1979 D Roosevelt dime becomes even more important when determining whether a coin has collector potential, because subtle visual details often reveal whether the piece is merely circulated or genuinely extraordinary. Experts closely inspect the torch lines on the reverse, the sharpness of Roosevelt's hair, the clarity of the mint mark, and the condition of the rim, since weak areas may indicate heavy wear, while unusually crisp details suggest a superior strike. Some of the most intriguing examples appear with bright silvery surfaces that almost resemble proof-like finishes despite never being intended as proof coins, while others display striking tonal variations caused by decades of storage conditions. A coin with vibrant natural toning and immaculate surfaces can attract far stronger demand than a dull example with scratches or discoloration. Even tiny differences in strike alignment matter, because coins struck slightly off-center or with uneven pressure can become highly collectible mint anomalies. Collectors also examine the edge carefully, searching for abnormalities in thickness or shape that may indicate a planchet issue. Under magnification, lettering that appears doubled or distorted can dramatically change the coin's appeal, especially if the doubling is consistent and authentic rather than damage caused after circulation. For many enthusiasts, The most thrilling possibility involves transitional or wrong planchet errors, because these are the kinds of discoveries that elevate modern coins into legendary collector territory. While Roosevelt dimes from this era were intended to be struck on copper-nickel-clad planchets, rare mistakes occasionally occurred when coins were struck on incorrect metal stock or defective blanks. A 1979 D dime with an unusual weight difference, abnormal coloration, or strange metallic appearance can immediately raise questions about whether something extraordinary happened during production. Some examples may appear slightly lighter or darker than normal, while others exhibit surfaces that seem smoother, brighter, or oddly textured compared to standard circulation strikes. In rare situations, collectors have encountered coins with dramatic misalignments, partial strikes, or missing clad layers that reveal copper tones beneath the surface, transforming an everyday dime into a conversation piece worth professional examination. The suspense comes from the fact that most people handling loose change would never notice these distinctions, allowing potentially valuable pieces to pass unnoticed through cash registers, vending machines, and pockets for years, before finally being identified by someone patient enough to inspect every detail. Market values for collectible 1979 D Roosevelt dimes vary enormously depending on condition, rarity, eye appeal, and authentication, and that unpredictable range is exactly what keeps collectors fascinated. Minor variations or attractive high-grade pieces with subtle anomalies have sometimes reached illustrative values between $2,500 and $7,500, particularly when demand rises among specialists searching for difficult registry quality examples. More notable specimens with stronger doubling, significant strike irregularities, or premium preservation have been associated with discussions near $9,000 or even $10,000 when certified by respected grading services. In the world of mint eras, unusual anomalies can push attention even higher, with dramatic off-center strikes, missing clad layers, or highly distinctive production flaws occasionally inspiring conversations around $25,000 depending on rarity and collector competition. These figures are never guaranteed, and the coin market changes constantly, but the emotional impact remains powerful because the idea that a small dime could represent a sudden windfall captures the imagination of nearly everyone who hears these stories. For some people, discovering such a coin feels like finding hidden treasure inside an ordinary jar of spare change that had been ignored for decades. What intensifies the mystery surrounding the 1979 D Roosevelt dime is how condition alone can completely alter its destiny. Most examples spent years moving through circulation, gathering scratches, dullness, and wear from countless transactions, but a tiny percentage survived with remarkably preserved surfaces that now stand out dramatically under professional grading standards. Coins graded at the highest mint state levels become increasingly difficult to locate because even microscopic imperfections can lower the final assessment. A sharply struck specimen with blazing luster, clean fields, and nearly untouched details may attract collectors willing to pay extraordinary premiums simply because so few survive in elite condition. Certain rare collector pieces tied to unusual storage conditions, exceptional tunning, or fascinating provenance have inspired illustrative valuations around $12,000 or $15,000, particularly when demand spikes during competitive auctions. In more extreme cases, unusual finds paired with strong collector demand have led to discussions reaching $65,000, especially when the coin combines multiple desirable traits like superior preservation and a dramatic minting anomaly. The emotional weight of such discoveries often becomes personal, because owners suddenly realize the tiny coin they nearly spent on coffee could represent a life-changing opportunity. Collectors searching for valuable 1979 D dimes often rely on a careful inspection process that transforms ordinary coin handling into something resembling detective work. They begin by checking the coin's weight with precise digital scales, because even small differences can indicate planchet abnormalities or missing metal layers. They study the coin's color under strong light, watching for unusual silver brightness, copper exposure, or strange tunning patterns that separate it from normal clad examples. The strike alignment is equally important, since tilted designs, uneven spacing, or partially missing details may reveal minting problems that dramatically increase collector interest. Experts also examine the rim shape for irregular thickness, flattening, or distortion that could indicate production errors rather than damage from circulation. Under magnification, tiny signs of letter doubling around Liberty, In God We Trust, or the date can become critical clues. Yet experienced numismatists repeatedly stress the importance of professional authentication because altered coins, post-mint damage, and counterfeit modifications can easily fool inexperienced collectors. A certified evaluation from a trusted grading service often determines whether a coin remains an interesting curiosity or enters the category of a truly significant collectible. Even now, millions of Roosevelt dimes continue circulating unnoticed through grocery stores, gas stations, old piggy banks, and inherited collections, which is exactly why the legend of the 1979 D refuses to disappear among coin enthusiasts who believe remarkable discoveries are still waiting to happen. Somewhere, an overlooked dime with a strange strike, an unusual weight, or extraordinary preservation may still rest inside an ordinary roll from the bank, hidden among countless common pieces that nobody bothers to inspect closely. That possibility creates a quiet tension every time collectors sift through loose change, because the next coin turned over could reveal the kind of once-in-a-lifetime discovery people talk about for years. And just when it seems impossible for another modern coin to shock the collecting world, whispers continue spreading about an even stranger issue with an even more unbelievable backstory. A coin so unexpected that some experts still debate how a few surviving examples ever escaped the mint at all. Next coin. The 1970 Roosevelt dime entered circulation during a turbulent period in American history, quietly passing from hand to hand while the nation was dealing with social change, economic pressure, and the lingering transformation of U.S. coinage after silver had disappeared from most circulating denominations just a few years earlier. At first glance, the coin seemed completely ordinary, carrying the familiar image of President Franklin Delano Roosevelt on the obverse and the classic torch and branches design on the reverse. Yet beneath that ordinary appearance lies a fascinating collecting story shaped by minting inconsistencies, overlooked production anomalies, and a surprising number of coins that developed reputations far beyond their face value. The Philadelphia and Denver mints produced enormous quantities of dimes that year, and because the public treated them as simple everyday currency, few people bothered preserving high-quality examples. Decades later, collectors began realizing that certain 1970 dimes displayed unusual strike characteristics, sharp details, strange surface textures, and subtle mechanical irregularities that separated them from the millions of worn pieces still sitting unnoticed in circulation jars and inherited collections. That growing realization transformed a once-ignored modern coin into an object of intense curiosity among numismatists who believe some of the most valuable discoveries are hidden where almost nobody thinks to look. The visual details of the 1970 Roosevelt dime play a major role in its appeal because the smallest differences can dramatically influence how collectors interpret the coin's rarity and desirability. Under magnification, the lines in Roosevelt's hair, the clarity of the torch flames, and the spacing of the lettering can reveal whether the coin was struck with unusual sharpness or suffered from die fatigue during production. Some examples display bright, frosty surfaces with remarkably clean fields that seem almost proof-like despite being made for ordinary circulation, while others reveal subtle doubling around Liberty or the date that immediately captures the attention of experienced collectors. A perfectly centered strike with full details and crisp edges becomes far harder to locate than most people imagine, because dimes circulated heavily in the early 1970s, and even minor contact marks often reduced a coin's long-term collector value. Certain specimens also developed dramatic natural toning over decades of storage, producing shades of blue, gold, violet, or deep silver that create a completely different visual personality from the dull gray appearance of common circulated examples. The more collectors studied these details, the more they realized that the 1970 Roosevelt dime was not a simple modern coin at all, but a complicated series filled with tiny variations capable of changing everything. One reason the 1970 dime gained so much attention is the possibility of minting errors and transitional oddities that emerged during an era when production speed sometimes created opportunities for mistakes to escape quality control. Some coins from this year show off-center strikes, clipped planchets, die cracks, or broad strikes that altered the normal shape of the coin and instantly separated them from standard circulation pieces. Others appear with unusual rim expansion or weakly struck areas that suggest uneven striking pressure during the minting process. There are also reports of coins displaying strong machine doubling and, in rarer situations, true double die characteristics that create visible separation in the lettering and numbers when viewed carefully under magnification. Collectors became especially fascinated by examples with missing clad layers because these coins reveal unexpected copper coloration beneath the surface, giving the dime a striking appearance unlike ordinary examples. The suspense surrounding these errors comes from the fact that many remained hidden in circulation for years, overlooked by people who never imagined a tiny production mistake could someday attract national attention at coin shows and auctions. The history behind the Roosevelt Dime series adds another layer of emotional weight to the 1970 issue because the coin itself represents continuity during a period when American coinage was evolving rapidly. Silver dimes had vanished from circulation after 1964, replaced by copper-nickel-clad compositions that many Americans initially distrusted because the coins felt lighter and looked different from older silver issues. By 1970, the transition had become normal, yet collectors today often view this era as historically important because it marked the beginning of modern U.S. coinage as people know it now. That context makes unusual 1970 dimes even more compelling because they exist at the intersection of old collecting traditions and newer minting technology. Some collectors searching bank rolls have described the experience of spotting a strangely colored dime or an unusually sharp strike and feeling a sudden rush of disbelief, realizing they may have discovered something overlooked for decades. Stories continue circulating about inherited jars of change that unknowingly contained rare varieties, reminding collectors that extraordinary finds often emerge from the most ordinary places imaginable. As interest in modern-era coins expanded, the market for exceptional 1970 Roosevelt dimes began climbing in ways few people could have predicted years earlier. Notable examples with attractive surfaces, visible doubling, or unusual strike features have reportedly achieved auction or private sale outcomes ranging from $5,000 to $12,000, depending on rarity and condition, especially when certified by respected grading services. Higher-grade errors with dramatic visual appeal have crossed into the $20,000 range, particularly when they combine multiple desirable traits such as strong luster, sharp details, and unusual production anomalies. Rare error examples with extreme off-center strikes or missing clad layers have inspired intense bidding activity around $35,000 in certain sales, proving how aggressively collectors pursue coins that stand apart from ordinary circulation pieces. These results are never guaranteed, and values constantly fluctuate based on collector demand, authenticity, and market conditions. But the emotional power behind such discoveries remains enormous because the thought of a dime transforming into the equivalent of a major financial breakthrough captures the imagination instantly. The highest levels of the market become even more dramatic when mint state preservation enters the equation because truly pristine 1970 Roosevelt dimes are extraordinarily difficult to locate. Most coins from this year experience decades of circulation wear, leaving only a tiny number with blazing mint luster, immaculate surfaces, and razor-sharp strike quality. Strong mint-state examples with exceptional eye appeal have reportedly approached or exceeded $50,000 in specialized collector markets, especially when tied to unusual minting traits or elite certification grades. In even rarer situations, unusual mistakes such as dramatic wrong planchet strikes, major die misalignment, or extraordinary production flaws have generated discussions near $75,000, turning a common-looking dime into the centerpiece of advanced collections. The most extreme errors, particularly those considered nearly impossible or historically significant within the Roosevelt Dime series, have reportedly crossed the $100,000 threshold in major sales. And somewhere in the upper reaches of numismatic history, there are whispered stories of one-of-a-kind discoveries connected to the 1970 dime approaching $120,000 because of their unmatched rarity and the intense competition among elite collectors desperate to own something no one else possesses. What makes these stories so emotionally gripping is how often they involve missed opportunities, accidental discoveries, and moments of realization that arrive too late. People have unknowingly spent potentially valuable dimes on parking meters, vending machines, or cups of coffee because they never thought to inspect the coin closely before letting it go. Others discovered rare examples only after inheriting old collections from relatives who quietly saved rolls of coins for decades without understanding what might be hidden inside. Imagine opening a forgotten box in an attic, noticing a single dime with unusual coloration or oddly shaped rims, then learning through professional authentication that the coin may represent a life-changing collectible worth more than a luxury car or the down payment on a home. Those stories fuel the obsession surrounding the 1970 Roosevelt dime because they remind collectors that hidden value often disguises itself as something completely ordinary. The difference between an everyday 10-cent piece and a remarkable numismatic discovery sometimes comes down to details so small they escape notice entirely until the right person finally takes a closer look. Careful examination remains essential for anyone searching for valuable 1970 Roosevelt dimes because the tiniest characteristics can determine whether a coin is common or potentially extraordinary. Collectors often begin by weighing the coin precisely to detect possible planchet abnormalities or missing clad layers, then compare the metal color against normal examples to identify unusual copper exposure or abnormal tunning. Strike alignment must also be inspected carefully because off-center impressions, distorted lettering, or uneven spacing may reveal minting irregularities that dramatically increase collector interest. Rim expansion or flattening can indicate striking pressure issues, while visible doubling in the lettering or date may point toward important die varieties rather than ordinary wear. Yet even experienced collectors know that appearances alone can be misleading, which is why professional authentication becomes absolutely critical before any major sale or valuation discussion. Some altered coins imitate rare errors convincingly, and impulsive decisions have caused owners to lose significant opportunities by selling too quickly without expert evaluation. Next coin. The 1967 Roosevelt dime entered American pockets during one of the most unusual periods in United States coinage history, a time when the mint was struggling to keep enough coins in circulation, while public anxiety over disappearing silver currency pushed people to hoard older money at an astonishing rate. To discourage collecting and slow the removal of coins from commerce, the U.S. Mint temporarily removed mint marks from circulating coinage between 1965 and 1967, which instantly gave the 1967 Roosevelt dime a strange identity among collectors, because even today its missing mint mark causes some people to assume the coin is incomplete or unusual before they ever learn the real story behind it. At first glance, the dime appears ordinary, carrying Roosevelt's familiar portrait and the classic torch design on the reverse. Yet beneath that plain appearance lies a fascinating combination of minting pressure, production shortcuts, and overlooked variations that gradually transformed certain examples into highly sought-after collectibles. Unlike earlier silver dimes, the 1967 issue was struck in copper-nickel-clad composition, making it part of the dramatic shift in American coinage that forever changed how money looked and felt in everyday life. And because so many of these coins circulated heavily, truly remarkable examples became far rarer than most people realize. Collectors became increasingly fascinated by the 1967 Roosevelt dime because the coin often reveals subtle characteristics that are easy to miss unless examined carefully under strong light and magnification. Some examples display unusually sharp details in Roosevelt's hair and ear, while others show softer strikes that reflect the enormous production demands placed on the mint during that era. The reverse torch lines can appear either bold and fully separated or faint and blurry, depending on die condition and striking pressure. And these tiny differences matter tremendously in the world of numismatics because they help determine whether a coin stands out from millions of ordinary examples. Certain dimes from 1967 also developed striking natural toning after decades of storage, producing rich gold, icy blue, or smoky violet colors that dramatically increase visual appeal. A few collectors have discovered pieces with surfaces so reflective they almost resemble proof coins despite being intended for circulation, creating the kind of mystery that fuels endless debate at coin conventions and auctions. The deeper enthusiasts studied the series, the more they realized that hidden within the massive production numbers were small groups of coins with remarkable individuality and surprising collector demand. One of the most intriguing aspects of the 1967 Roosevelt dime involves the unusual minting errors and production flaws that escaped during a period of intense manufacturing pressure. Because the mint prioritized quantity over perfection, some dies deteriorated rapidly, leading to coins with visible doubling, distorted lettering, weakly struck details, or irregular rims that immediately separate them from normal examples. Off-center strikes occasionally appeared, creating dramatic visual imbalances that transformed an ordinary dime into something collectors considered memorable and highly desirable. There are also examples with clipped planchets, die cracks, broad strikes, and partially missing clad layers that expose copper tones beneath the silver-colored outer surface, giving the coin an appearance unlike anything most people expect from a dime. What makes these discoveries especially exciting is the fact that many of them remained unnoticed in circulation for years because cashiers, shoppers, and even casual coin savers rarely inspected modern dimes closely enough to recognize the anomalies. Somewhere, hidden in old jars or inherited collections, there may still be unusual 1967 dimes waiting to surprise someone who finally pauses long enough to examine the details. The absence of mint marks during this era added an extra layer of confusion and intrigue that still affects collectors today because it removed one of the easiest ways people normally identify coin origins. Without a visible mint mark, collectors were forced to focus more intensely on strike quality, die characteristics, and surface preservation rather than relying on traditional mint distinctions. That unusual historical context turned the 1967 Roosevelt dime into a coin where condition and errors matter far more than many casual observers would expect. A single sharply struck example with blazing luster and nearly flawless surfaces can attract extraordinary attention simply because most surviving coins from that period suffered years of wear and rough handling. Stories continue circulating among collectors about individuals who unknowingly spent rare examples decades ago because they assumed all 1967 dimes were identical. The emotional impact of those stories remains powerful because the idea that a forgotten dime could have represented a financial breakthrough or once-in-a-lifetime discovery creates a sense of suspense every time someone searches through old change. As collector demand increased for exceptional modern coins, the market for rare 1967 Roosevelt dimes began producing remarkable documented sales that shocked people who never imagined a clad dime could command serious money. Smaller but visually significant errors, particularly examples with noticeable doubling or unusual strike characteristics, have reportedly achieved auction and private sale outcomes ranging from $3,000 to $10,000, depending on rarity, eye appeal, and certification. Unusual finds involving dramatic planchet flaws, missing clad sections, or distinctive minting abnormalities have drawn attention near the $18,000 level when authenticated by respected grading services. High-grade examples with extraordinary preservation and sharp detail have crossed into the $28,000 range, especially when collectors compete aggressively for registry-quality specimens. These outcomes are never promises or guarantees because the coin market changes constantly, but the historical record of such sales continues fueling excitement around the 1967 issue. Every collector understands that condition, authenticity, and demand can shift values dramatically, yet the possibility of discovering a coin tied to one of these extraordinary outcomes keeps the search alive. The most dramatic stories surrounding the 1967 Roosevelt Dime often involve powerful mint errors that combine rarity with unforgettable visual impact. Strong error pieces featuring major off-center strikes, broad strikes, or severe die failures have reportedly reached around $45,000 in specialized collector markets, because such coins stand out immediately even to people unfamiliar with numismatics. More extreme mint state errors with brilliant surfaces and highly unusual production characteristics have climbed toward $65,000 in documented collector sales, especially when certified at elite condition levels. Rare misstrikes that appear almost impossible according to normal mint standards have generated astonishing attention, with some extraordinary examples associated with results near $95,000. And in the rarest category of all are the exceptional or unique coins that advanced collectors pursue relentlessly, examples tied to unusual minting events or unmatched preservation that have reportedly approached $110,000 in private transactions and elite auctions. The emotional intensity surrounding these coins comes from the realization that a dime once treated as disposable pocket change can suddenly become the centerpiece of a collection worth more than many homes or luxury vehicles. What makes the 1967 Roosevelt Dime especially captivating is how often its greatest discoveries emerge through accidents, inheritance, or moments of pure chance, rather than deliberate searching. Families cleaning out old dresser drawers have unknowingly encountered coins later identified as valuable errors, while longtime collectors still remember the regret of spending unusual-looking dimes years before understanding what they might have been worth. Imagine the feeling of discovering that a coin carried casually for decades in a forgotten envelope could have represented a major financial turning point if identified sooner. Some people describe searching through rolls of dimes late at night, examining one coin after another under a lamp, driven by the possibility that a rare error or pristine survivor may still be hiding in plain sight. Those moments create an emotional connection far beyond money because they tap into the universal idea that extraordinary opportunities sometimes appear disguised as ordinary objects. The 1967 dime embodies that mystery perfectly, appearing simple and forgettable until the right combination of detail, rarity, and preservation suddenly changes everything. Responsible examination remains essential for anyone investigating a potential 1967 Roosevelt dime rarity, because subtle distinctions can determine whether a coin is ordinary or historically significant. Collectors often begin by checking the weight carefully to identify possible missing clad layers or abnormal planchet composition, then study the metal color under bright light for unusual copper exposure or unexpected tunning patterns. Strike quality must be examined closely because uneven pressure, distorted alignment, or weakly impressed features may indicate valuable production anomalies. The rim should be inspected for expansion, flattening, or clipping, while magnification can reveal letter doubling around Liberty, In God We Trust, or the date that may point toward important die varieties. Yet experienced numismatists consistently warn against impulsive selling because counterfeit alterations and post-mint damage can imitate genuine errors convincingly. Professional authentication and grading remain the safest path for determining whether a coin belongs among ordinary circulation pieces or the remarkable group of documented 1967 Roosevelt dimes that transformed forgotten pocket change into legendary collector discoveries.